Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to today's newspaper review. I'm Chidera Esom, and I'll be taking you through the stories making today's headlines. Firstly, on the Punch newspaper. In the Punch newspaper on page 2, still on Oyo school children adoption. Oyo protests go nationwide. NAS moves on state police. The Nigerian NAS are moving on state police against the Oyo school children adoption. At the top of the newspaper, on Ebola alert, FG tightens airport border screening. The federal government have tightened screening at the airport concerning the Ebola alert. To get that story, you go to page 18 of the Punch newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, so safe officer in police net over Ogun man's death. The so safe officers are in police custody over the death of an Ogun's man named Sussex. This incident happened yesterday. To get that story, you go to page 6. Still in Punch newspaper, Tinubu to address National Assembly on June 12th, which June 12th is a Democracy Day. President Tinubu is going to address the National Assembly on Democracy Day, which is June 12th. To get that story, you go to page 18 of the Punch newspaper. Away from the Punch newspaper to the Matrix, which is boldly written, adopted school children teachers, Senate, reps can talk tough. Still on the matter of Oyo school children adoption, Senate reps can talk tough concerning the adopted school children. To get that story, go to page 2 of the newspaper. At the top of the newspaper, Customs, World Bank Group strengthen post-clearance audit capacity. The Customs World Bank groups have strengthened post-clearance audit capacity. To get the story, you go to page 3 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, RCCG denies Adeboye campaigns for government in power. The RCCG, which is the Redeemed Christian Church, denies Adeboye, which Adeboye is their pastor, campaigns for government in power. To get that story, you go to page 2. Nollywood mourns as tap ban confirms death of actor Okiki Adeshina. To get that story, you go to page 23 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, dual party membership saga. Chinda bows to pressure, resigns as minority leader. Chinda, which is an APC aspirant, bows to pressure and resigns as minority leader. To get that story, you go to page 9 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Vanguard, which is boldly written, still on Oyo, Borno kidnappings. More pressure on federal government to rescue adopted school children. We just pray that these adopted school children will be rescued and returned home safely. More pressures on governments. They are putting more pressures on federal government to enhance the rescue of the adopted school children. To get the story, you go to page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. At the top of the newspaper, reps call for immediate funding for NCDC amid rising Ebola threats. To get that story, you go to page 9 of the newspaper. 13 reps switch parties. Chinda resigns as minority leader. Chinda, an aspirant, has resigned as minority leader, and 13 representatives have switched parties. They have defected to another parties. To get the story, you go to page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. Still in the Vanguard newspaper, at the bottom, between justice for victims and mercy for terrorists, Operation Safe Corridor. Between justice for victims and mercy for terrorists. If you get that story, you go to page 14 of the Vanguard newspaper. End terror in 90 days or resign. To get that story, you go to page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the New Telegraph, which is boldly written there on page 2, 6, and 7 of the newspaper. CAN demands state of emergency on security, declares Black Sunday over killings. The CAN has demanded state of emergency over the security crisis that have been happening in Nigeria, and they have declared Black Sunday over the killings and the abduction of Oyo school children. To get that story, you have to go to page 6, 2, and 7 of the New Telegraph. At the top of the New Telegraph newspaper, on page 6, It's written there, Nigerian exchange delivers 374% return as market value surged by 132.13 trillion naira. The market values has reduced under the price of 132.13 trillion naira. To get that story, go to page 6 of the newspaper. World Bank strengthens Nigerian post-clearance auditing capacity. The World Bank has strengthened Nigeria's post-clearance audit capacity. To get that story, you go to page 29 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, APC in fresh crisis as government defy Tinubu's return agenda. The APC are in fresh crisis right now as government have defined Tinubu's return agenda. To get that story or to read more about the story, you go to page 4 of the newspaper. FG threatens border controls over deadly Ebola on Ebola crisis. The federal government have tightened border control over the deadly Ebola crisis. To get that story, you go to page 5 and 6 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Guardian, on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper, governors under fire as insecurity threatens 52 million pupils basic education. Still on insecurity issue, the governors under fire has threatened 52 million people's basic education, and still the Oyo school adoption that they are still in captivity. On page 4 of the Guardian newspaper, DSS explains in the base airport incident, says watch list under review. The DSS has explained in the base airport incident. What are the incidents that happened at the airport concerning in the base, says watch list under review. To know more about the incident, go to page 4 of the Guardian newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, presidency warns against night travel as Kwara stakeholders decry killings. With the rate at which the insecurities are rising, the presidency has warned against night travel as Kwara stakeholders decry killings, and still on the adoption. To get that story, you go to page 30 of the Guardian newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, WHO rates Nigeria Ebola risk low despite global threats. Still in the same newspaper, RCCG denies Adeboye's silence on insecurity economic challenges. Pastor Adeboye, who is the General Overseer of the Redeemed Christian Church, has denied silence on insecurity and economic challenges. To read more about the story, go to page 5 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Trust, still on Oyo school adoption. Teachers protest wave of school adoptions. The teachers are protesting wave of school adoption and has caused for states of emergency on insecurity. To read more about the story, go to page 3, 4, and 5 of the newspaper. At the top of the newspaper, many killed as Sokoto records another attack in 48 hours. In just 48 hours, many has been killed in Sokoto and has recorded another attack. Is still on insecurity of our country. To get that story, go to page 6 of the Daily Trust newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, Borno records 274 fresh cholera cases in 24 hours. In just 24 hours, Borno State has records 274 fresh cholera cases. To get that story, go to page 6 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to The Hope, boldly written. Ondo government approves 2.38 kilometer flyover in Akure. With the rate at which the insecurity has been happening in our country, the Ondo government are still approving 2.38 kilometer flyovers in Akure. At the top of the newspaper, sack security chiefs if terrorism persists after 90 days. This is coming from the General Overseer of Redeemed Christian Church, Adeboye, that they should sack security chiefs if the terrorism persists after 90 days. At the bottom of the newspaper, 178 communities at risk of flooding in Kano. This is coming from NEMA. 178 communities are at the risk of flooding in Kano State. Still in the same newspaper, INEC ready for Ondo South by election. And the Independent National Electoral Commission are ready for Ondo South by-election. Still in the same newspaper, cholera claims 39 in Borno, cases rise to 4,204. On the cholera case, the cholera has claims 39 in Borno State, and the cases are rising up to 4,204 people. Away from that newspaper to The Nation, which is boldly written, Senate, House, protesters, let's get kidnapped victims out. Senate and House of Representatives protesters are saying that they should get the kidnapped victims out, and especially they should get the Oyo school children adoption out of captivity. At the top of the newspaper, ADC presidential primary, shameful, Babachir insists. Still in the same newspaper, don't politicize insecurity, says Akpabio and Wike. This is coming from Akpabio and Wike. Wike is the Federal Capital Territory Minister, saying that they should not politicize insecurity. At the bottom of the newspaper, ADC asks judge to quit case. The African Democratic Congress are asking the judge to quit case. To get that story, go to page 25 of the Nation newspaper. And that's all for today's newspaper review. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates. I'm Chidera Esom. Do have a beautiful day.